Nobody in Willow Creek ever expected much to change. Days were predictable. The land was steady, and folks knew each other well enough to guess what they'd say before the words ever left their mouths. But on that late summer afternoon, so hot the air shimmered above the dirt road, changed road straight toward the Lawson Ranch like a dust storm nobody saw coming. Cole Lawson had been up since before dawn. That was normal for him. The cattle didn't care if a man was tired, sore, or carrying the weight of the world between his shoulder blades. They still needed feeding, moving, and tending. And Cole, he'd never been the type to leave a job undone. He rode out toward the lower pasture with the same easy confidence he always carried, had pulled low, reins loose between his fingers, eyes sharp and steady. But even with that calm, something inside him had been unsettled for days now, ever since the wind had shifted earlier that week, and those deep rumbling sounds started echoing from the valley at night. He'd had that creeping feeling something was wrong. He couldn't name it, couldn't explain it, just felt it. The kind of feeling old ranchers talked about in low voices around a fire. The kind that never meant anything good. But as Cole reached the far end of the ranch where the fence line dipped toward the dried riverbed, he suddenly pulled his horse to a stop because someone was already there, and she wasn't supposed to be Ellie Marston, the daughter of the town's aging sheriff, the girl who used to follow Cole around when he was barely out of school, pestering him with questions about horses, saddles, cattle brands, anything she could find an excuse to ask. Back then, she was just a kid with 2 pigtails and an attitude far too loud for her tiny frame. But now she was grown. And Cole hadn't quite realized how much until that moment, when she stood with her back to him, bending over the fence, staring at something in the distance. The sun caught her hair, no longer tied up like before, but flowing loose down her backhand. He felt that uneasy stirring again. Not danger this time. Something else. He cleared his throat. Ellie, what are you doing all the way out here? She actually jumped and spun around with a hand pressed to her chest. Cole Lawson, you scared the life out of me. He tried to hide his smile, but it tugged at the corner of his mouth anyway. You're on private land. Again she crossed her arms defensively, though her cheeks were lightly flushed from more than the heat. I told you before, I'm not trespassing. I'm observing. Observing what? She took a tiny step closer, lowering her voice as if the wind might overhear. You heard that sound last night, the one everyone's talking about. Cole's eyes narrowed. Maybe you did, she said confidently, reading him too easily. Because I heard it too. And I came out here this morning to check on something. And now, she turned back to whatever she'd been staring at. Now I think we've got a problem. Cole slowly dismounted, boots hitting the ground with a heavy thud. He walked toward her, squinting at the stretch of land beyond the fence. At first he didn't see anything unusual. Same dusty plains, same patchy grass, same dried mud from a river that hadn't seen water in years. But then he noticed the shadows. Deep, sharp, wrong. Shadows that didn't belong to trees or rocks or anything natural. Cole stepped closer to Ellie, following the line she was pointing toward. His heartbeat kicked up a little. Not fear exactly, just that instinct again. That warning. What is that? Ellie whispered. Cole stared. He didn't answer, not at first, because for a long moment he couldn't speak, he couldn't think. He'd only stand there as his breath left him slow, heavy, almost dragged from his lungs. It's so big, he said under his breath, and he meant it. Because stretching across the lower valley floor, cutting a deep scar through the hard earth, was a massive impression. A footprint, or something like a footprint. Perfectly shaped, too defined to be an erosion mark, too fresh to be old, too impossible to ignore. Ellie stepped closer to him, her shoulder brushing against his arm. Cole, what could have made something like that? He swallowed. Nothing I've ever seen. Is it an animal? No animal this side of the Rocky Mountains has feet this size and the shape. It's almost human, Cole finished for her. That word hung between them like smoke. Human, but far, far too large. Ellie's voice came out barely above a whisper. Do you think it's connected to the noises at night? Cole didn't answer. He just kept staring, jaw tight, thoughts racing faster than he wanted to admit. Because deep in his memory, buried under years of ranch work, responsibility, and the hard logic he'd lived by, he recalled a story. One his grandfather used to tell. One nobody believed. One Cole had always laughed off. Until now. Ellie finally broke the silence. We need to go down there. We need to look. We're not going anywhere near that thing. Her eyes widened. Cole? I said no. His voice came out firmer than he intended. He adjusted his hat, stepping back from the fence. You don't poke at something you can't understand. Her frustration sparked instantly, so we just ignore it. For now, that's stupid. It's called being careful. Ellie planted her feet in the dirt, refusing to be dismissed. Cole, this is your land. You can't just pretend nothing's wrong. I'm not pretending anything. I'm saying we don't walk straight into danger without knowing what we're facing. So you do think it's dangerous? I think anything that leaves a print that size isn't gone. Nah, offer you a handshake. She opened her mouth to argue again, but suddenly a new sound filled the air. A low, distant rumble, deep, echoing, familiar. Ellie froze. Cole's eyes shot toward the ridgeline. The earth under their boots trembled just slightly, but enough to make the hair on the back of his neck rise. There it is, Ellie whispered. That same sound. Cole grabbed her arm instinctively, pulling her back from the fence. We need to go. But now Ellie, for the first time since he'd known her, she didn't argue. She didn't fight. She just nodded. fear flickering into her eyes as another tremor rolled through the valley floor. Birds scattered from the trees, dust lifted in swirling patterns. The wind shifted abruptly, carrying a strange, metallic scent. Cole didn't like it, not one bit. He helped Ellie mount his horse, swinging up behind her before snapping the reins hard. The horse bolted toward the ranch, hooves pounding the earth in a frantic rhythm. Behind them, far across the valley, the ground seemed to move just for a moment, as if something massive had shifted under the earth. Ellie twisted slightly in the saddle, trying to look back. Cole, what if whatever made that imprint is still there? It is, he said quietly. She shivered. How do you know? Because the ground doesn't shake for no reason. They kept riding until the ranch house came into view. Only then did Cole slow the horse, stopping near the barn. Ellie slid down, trying to catch her breath. Cole dismounted after her, but his eyes stayed locked on the horizon behind them. What are you going to do? She asked softly. He didn't look at her. Not yet. I'm gonna find out what's on my land, he said finally, but not alone. Then he turned toward her, his expression darkening, resolve settling into every line of his face. And Ellie, you're not going back out there, and not without me. She swallowed hard because she could see it too, whatever they'd discovered. This was only the beginning. The storm rolled in quicker than either of them expected. 1 minute the sky was a pale stretch of open blue, and the next, thick gray clouds came crawling over the ridge like a herd of mean-spirited ghosts. The wind picked up, pushing dust across the pasture, bending grass sideways, rattling the brittle branches of the cottonwoods. Clara pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, though the cold wasn't what had been sitting heavy in her chest since that morning. Not after what she'd shown him, and certainly not after the way he'd looked at it. That thing she'd uncovered in the dirt that made him fall silent, as if the world itself had paused mid. She walked beside him now, both horses trailing behind on loose reins, following them toward the half-collapsed storage shed at the edge of the property. The air tasted like iron just before lightning strikes, and the wind tugged at her braid again and again. But Jack hadn't said more than 5 words since they left the canyon. She tried again. Jack, you can't pretend it didn't happen. You saw it. You saw the size of that thing. No one carves something like that for no reason. Jack didn't answer. He kept walking, jaw locked tight, boots sinking into soft patches of earth. Clara knew him well enough to recognize he wasn't ignoring her, he was thinking hard. And when Jack thought that hard, it usually meant trouble. Finally, he spoke. Clara, I don't know what we stumbled into, but whatever it is, it didn't belong under that rock. Someone hid it. Someone wanted it buried deep. He paused and looked at her. A shadow of uncertainty, no fear on his face, and things folks try that hard to hide usually stay hidden for a reason. The wind slapped her hair over her eyes. She brushed it aside. It was too big to be anything normal, she said quietly. You know that, and the markings. I've never seen symbols like that in any of the old tribal records, not even in POS books. Jack winced. He hated when she brought up her father's research. It made her feel like she was still following a ghost she never got to meet. But this time, he didn't argue. They stepped inside the shed. The door creaked loud enough to drown the first rumble of thunder. Dust drifted down in lazy spirals, catching what little light still slipped through the warped slats of wood. The shed smelled of old hay, rust, and years of forgotten tools. Jack crouched by a crate and pulled out an old oil lantern. He lit it, and warm amber filled the room. Clara's face looked softer in the glow, though her eyes stayed sharp, searching. Sit, Jack said. She frowned. I'm not a child. Never said you were. But you were shaking. She realized he was right. Her hands trembled. Whether from the storm or the discovery, she didn't know. She sat on an overturned bucket while Jack paced, rubbing the back of his neck, muttering to himself about size, weight, structure, carvings, everything they'd seen when she brushed the dirt off that stone cylinder half buried in the canyon floor. Clara watched him. Jack wasn't an excited talker. If anything, he only spoke when something rattled him deep enough to force the words out. So tell me straight, she said. What do you think it is? Jack leaned on a beam, arms crossed, lantern light catching the edge of his stubbled jaw. I think it's old, he said. Older than the ranch, older than the early settlements, maybe older than the tribes that lived here before. His voice dropped. And I think it wasn't meant to be found. Clara swallowed. Then why did I? She asked, almost whispering. Why me? Jack pushed away from the beam and walked over, kneeling in front of her. His eyes held something she rarely saw in him, a softness, tinted with worry. Maybe it was chance, maybe it was a message, but Clara, I need you to understand something. That thing was big. Bigger than anything I've ever seen come from this land. And whatever shaped it, carved it, hid it, didn't do it for decoration. Lightning flashed through the cracks of the shed, painting the world silver for half a heartbeat. Thunder followed, close, deep, rattling the boards under their feet. Clara pulled her coat tighter. What do we do now? She asked. Jack stood, running a hand through his hair. We think we don't go back tonight. The storm's too rough, and tomorrow we'll see. She hated that answer. Jack, we can't leave it there. What if someone else finds it? What if it gets washed out in the storm? Jack's expression hardened. If it gets washed out, then we'll know that Canyon was hiding more than one secret. He began gathering rope, tools, and a tarp, stuffing them into a saddlebag with forceful movements that betrayed his nerves. Clara rose, stepping closer. I know you're scared, she said quietly. Jack's hand stilled. He didn't look up. I'm not scared. She tilted her head. Then why won't you look at me? He exhaled sharply, then met her gaze. Because I don't want you to see that I am. Her breath caught. For a moment, the storm outside, the shaking shed, the strange ancient object, everything else disappeared. It was just him, just her, and the air between them filled with an unspoken truth they'd both been avoiding. You don't have to be scared alone, she said, his jaw tightened. Clara, things like this, big things, they change a place, change people. I've ever seen enough trouble in my life to know when something is bigger than the land it is buried in. She took a step closer. Then we face it together. Another flash of lightning lit the shed, and Jack's eyes softened in its glow. Together, he repeated. But before she could breathe in that small, fragile promise, a sound sliced through the storm, a distant crack, like wood splitting. Both of them froze. Not thunder. Something else. Something outside. Jack grabbed the lantern with one hand and the handle of his holstered revolver with the other. Stay behind me, he whispered. Clara didn't argue. They crept toward the shed door, boots silent against the dirt. The wind howled, rain starting to pepper the roof like handfuls of thrown gravel. Jack eased the door open an inch, lantern low, revolver raised. He stopped breathing. Jack, Clara whispered. He opened the door wider. Clara peered around him, and her stomach flipped violently because something was standing at the fence line. Not someone, something. Tall, thin, motionless, a silhouette blacker than the storm, outlined only when lightning flashed behind it. It didn't move, didn't speak, didn't step closer. It just stood there, staring toward the shed or toward them. Clara's pulse roared in her ears. What is that? She whispered. Jack's voice was barely a breath. I don't know. The figure shifted. Just a twitch, a tilt of the head. But it was enough to send cold needles crawling up Clara's spine. Jack lowered the lantern, hiding its glow, never taking his eyes off the shape in the rain. Back up, he murmured. Slow. Clara moved as told, her boots dragging over dirt. Jack stepped with her, inch by inch. The shed door hung half open, wind pulling at it, hinges squealing softly. Lightning struck again. And this time, the silhouette was gone. Clara's breath hitched. Web. Jack grabbed her wrist. Inside now. They rushed back, slamming the door, shoving a beam of broken wood against it. Rain poured harder, hammering the roof. Clara stumbled backward, chest tight, heart slamming so hard she felt it in her throat. Jack, what did we just see? He stared at the door, revolver still raised. The beginning, he whispered. Whatever was buried under that canyon. It wasn't alone, and outside, through the storm, a sound echoed quiet, steady, deliberate footsteps. Circling the shed, the footsteps circled the shed once, then again, soft, steady, unhurried, like whoever or whatever was outside wasn't stalking them, but studying them. Jack's grip tightened on his revolver. Clara pressed a hand to her own mouth to keep her breathing quiet. The lantern on the workbench flickered as the storm rattled the walls, shadows jumping across the warped wooden boards like frightened ghosts. Then silence, not a peaceful silence, a waiting silence. Clara forced herself forward, inching closer to Jack, whispering just loud enough for him to hear, Is it gone? Jack didn't blink. No. How can you tell? Because nothing that tall walks that quiet unless it wants to. Clara swallowed hard, the lantern glow trembling over her cheek as another thunderclap cracked right above the shed. The roof shook, dust rained down. Jack stepped back from the door, every muscle in his shoulders tight. The silence stretched thin enough to snap. Then something hit the door. Not hard, not loud, just one slow drag, like long fingers trailing down old splintered wood. Clara flinched. Jack stepped in front of her, gun raised, jaw clenched so tight a bolt of tension ran all the way to his temple. The dragging stopped. Thunder rolled again. Clara's voice broke out in a whisper. Jack, why is it here? Why would it follow us? Jack didn't answer at first. He stared at the door the way a wolf might stare at a bush hiding a cougar. Then he turned to her, voice barely audible. Because we touched something we shouldn't have. And whatever that carving was, whatever was buried in that canyon. He paused. It wasn't meant to be uncovered. Lightning flashed white, violent, blinding, and the shed door exploded inward. Not from force. Not from claws, or fists, or anything alive. The wind did it. A blast of storm air ripped the door off its hinges and hurled it against the wall with a sound like a shotgun blast. Lantern light flickered wildly, shadows spinning in the sudden gale. The rope on the tool rack danced. The horses outside screamed. Clara dropped to her knees with the impact. Jack lunged forward, grabbing her arm before she could fall fully, pulling her back behind him. Stay low. But no silhouette entered, no figure, nothing, just rain hammering the open doorway, wind screaming through the boards. Clara dared to look out into the darkness. What happened to it? She whispered. Where did it go? Jack didn't move. It's still here. Lightning cracked again, and for a split second, in that bright, merciless flash, Clara saw it, standing on the ridge 20 yards away, tall, inhumanly thin, too still to be flesh, its head angled downward, watching them, then gone. The darkness swallowed everything again. Clara felt her legs weaken. Jack steadied her with a hand on her shoulder. "We're leaving," he said. "Storm or not. What in this, Jack? We'll get lost out there. We'll get dragged out of here if we don't go." Clara's chest tightened. Dragged by what? Jack shook his head once, fiercely. "I don't want to find out." He grabbed the top bundle, slung the saddlebag over his shoulder, and pulled Clara toward the rear exit of the shed, a small service door barely wide enough for one person at a time. "Where are we going?" she asked. "The barn. It's the only place with a reinforced door and windows high enough nothing can reach through." "Jack," her voice cracked. "What about the canyon? What about the stone?" He froze at the threshold. Rain streamed down his hair, lightning outlining his shoulders in white fire. "We're not going back tonight," he said. "And if we do go back, I'm not letting you anywhere near that thing again." Clara stepped back, wounded. "I found it. It's mine to understand. You can't stop me. I'm not trying to." He turned to her, eyes full of something heavy and painful. "I'm trying to keep you alive." Another thunderclap, another flash, another glimpse farther now, but present, standing just beyond the broken fence line, watching. Jack grabbed Clara's hand. "Run." They sprinted through the storm, mud sucking at their boots, rain striking their faces so hard Clara could barely see. Wind roared in her ears, lightning cracked again and again, each flash revealing the ranch in frozen silver snapshots, the house, the barn, the field, the broken fence, and the dark figure moving fast. Clara gasped. "Jack, it's coming. I see it. Keep moving." They reached the barn doorstall, heavy, reinforced with thick planks Jack installed years earlier during a bad winter. He shoved one open, dragged Clara inside, then slammed it shut and dropped the metal bar into the brackets. Darkness swallowed them until Jack lit the second lantern. Warm light spilled over the hay bales, horse stalls, and rafters overhead. Clara leaned against a post, breath shaking. "Jack," she whispered. "I saw it. It was getting closer." Jack didn't answer. He listened, every muscle in his body rigid. Rain pounded the roof. Thunder shook the walls. The horses inside their stalls stomped nervously, snorting at the smell of fear and storm. Then a sound. Not from the door. Not from outside. From above. A slow, dragging step across the loft boards. Clara's breath died in her chest. "Jack," she mouthed silently. He raised the lantern toward the rafters where creaked hay fell in a soft cascade. Jack lifted his revolver, the lantern trembling slightly in his other hand. "Come down," he growled to the shadows above. "Show yourself." A low moan hummed through the barn. Not human, not animal, something in between, like wind blowing through a hollow carved in the earth. Then something shifted in the loft, closer, then closer still. Clara shrank behind Jack, gripping his sleeve. He kept the lantern raised, shoulders squared, breath held, and then a figure dropped, right in front of them. Not the tall silhouette, not the shadow from the ridge. A man, broken, mud-soaked, bleeding, his shirt torn, his face pale as death. He collapsed into the hay at their feet. Clara screamed. Jack knelt instantly, turning the man onto his side. The stranger coughed, blood mixing with rainwater dripping from his hair. "Help me," he rasped. Jack's voice hardened. "Who did this to you? What's out there? What did you see?" The man lifted a trembling hand, pointing toward the canyon. Clara shuddered as he whispered, voice cracking with terror. It woke up. Jack and Clara froze. The man gulped another breath. "I tried to bury it deeper, to cover it again, but it moved." His eyes widened to whites. "It called things from the dark." Jack exchanged a horrified glance with Clara. The man's voice faded to a whisper. "Run. Leave this land. Leave it." Then his body went slack. Still, Clara backed away, hand to her mouth. "Oh God, Jack, what did we find?" Jack stood slowly, revolver still in hand, rainwater dripping from his hair, the lantern light casting long shadows across the barn. "We found something older than this ranch," he said quietly. "Older than the tribes, older than the land." He walked to the barn door, staring into the storm outside. "And it's coming." Thunder rolled again, deep, earth-shaking, unnatural. Clara stepped beside him, voice trembling. "What do we do?" Jack glanced down at her, eyes fierce and steady in the lantern glow. "We fight," he said, "and we make damn sure this thing stays buried for good." Outside, through the cracks in the barn wall, a tall silhouette moved in the rain, waiting, watching, and the storm raged on.